Nobody in Millbrook knew that Sarah Chen could put a bullet through a dime at 1,200 yards. They only knew her as the woman who fixed their transmissions and changed their oil for 3 decades. But when insurgents pinned down a platoon of Marines in the Afghan mountains and satellite intel revealed only one person within range had the skills to make an impossible rescue shot, the quiet mechanic would prove that some secrets are worth keeping until lives depend on revealing them. The wrench slipped from Sarah Chen's oil-stained fingers at precisely 6:47 a.m., clattering against the concrete floor of Millbrook Auto Repair, with a sound that echoed through the empty garage like a gunshot. She winced at the noise, though. No one else would arrive for another hour. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 30 years of working in this same bay had taught her that mornings belonged to her alone, and she guarded that solitude with the same fierce protectiveness that had once made her the most feared precision shooter in the Marine Corps. Sarah bent to retrieve the wrench, her weathered hands moving with an economy of motion that spoke of countless repetitions. At 52, she moved like someone who understood that every gesture should serve a purpose, every action calculated for maximum efficiency. Her black hair, now streaked with premature silver, was pulled back in the same functional ponytail she'd worn since her discharge from the military in 1994. She dressed in the uniform of the invisible, navy blue coveralls that had seen better decades, steel-toed boots resoled more times than she could count, and a tool belt that hung around her waist like a familiar friend. The garage occupied a corner lot on Millbrook's main street, sandwiched between Henderson's Hardware and Martinez Family Bakery. From the outside, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a small-town auto repair shop that specialized in keeping ancient pickup trucks and family sedans running long past their intended lifespans. The faded sign above the entrance read, "Chen's Auto Repair," in letters that had been repainted exactly once in 3 decades, and even then only because the city had required it for licensing renewal. Sarah's workspace reflected the same deliberate ordinariness that characterized everything about her public persona. Her tools were organized with military precision, but she'd learned to introduce just enough casual disarray to avoid questions about why a small-town mechanic maintained equipment standards that would have impressed a master sergeant. Oil stains on the concrete floor followed patterns that looked random but actually marked designated areas for specific types of work. Her workbench appeared cluttered with the usual debris of automotive repair, but every component was positioned according to a system that allowed her to locate any tool within seconds, even in complete darkness. The first customer usually arrived around 8:30, giving Sarah nearly 2 hours to complete the work that actually mattered to her. She moved to the secure cabinet hidden behind a false panel in the storage room, her fingers dancing across a combination lock that protected equipment no small-town mechanic should have possessed. Inside, carefully maintained and climate-controlled, sat precision instruments that had once belonged to Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, United States Marine Corps Scout Sniper. Her custom rifle rested in foam padding, broken down into components that could be reassembled in under 3 minutes. The scope alone was worth more than most people in Millbrook made in 6 months. Its optics calibrated to specifications that allowed target acquisition at distances exceeding a mile. Ammunition boxes contained hand-loaded cartridges crafted to tolerances that would have impressed Olympic shooting competitors, each round tested and verified for consistency that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah conducted her morning ritual with the same methodical precision that had once made her the Marine Corps' most effective long-range asset in the Balkans conflict. She cleaned each component with solvents that weren't available through civilian channels, checked calibrations with instruments that most people couldn't afford, and verified mechanical function through procedures that belonged in military armories, rather than automotive repair shops. The maintenance routine took exactly 43 minutes, leaving her enough time to secure everything and transform back into the unremarkable mechanic that Millbrook expected to see. By the time Jake Morrison pushed through the front door at exactly 8:47, Sarah was elbow-deep in the engine compartment of a 1987 Ford pickup, her coveralls appropriately stained and her expression focused on the mundane challenges of replacing a water pump. Jake owned Morrison Construction, the largest employer in Millbrook after the grain elevator, and he treated Sarah with the casual dismissiveness that successful men often reserved for service providers they considered beneath their notice. "Sarah, I need you to look at the Suburban again," Jake announced without preamble, dropping his keys on her counter with more force than necessary. "The damn thing's pulling to the right, and I've got a job site 2 hours out of town. Can't afford to break down in the middle of nowhere." He spoke while scrolling through his phone, never making eye contact, his tone suggesting that Sarah's primary function was solving problems that interrupted his more important activities. Sarah emerged from under the Ford's hood, wiping her hands on a rag that had seen decades of similar service. "Same as last month? Alignment issues or something more serious?" Her voice carried the flat, unremarkable tone of someone who'd learned. That enthusiasm was often interpreted as incompetence in her chosen profession. She discovered early in her civilian career that customers expected their mechanics to be gruff and slightly inarticulate, as if technical expertise somehow precluded normal communication skills. Jake finally looked up from his phone, his expression reflecting the impatience of someone who believed his problems deserved immediate priority regardless of other commitments. "How the hell should I know? That's what I pay you to figure out. Just fix whatever's wrong and call me when it's done." He turned toward the door, already dismissing Sarah from his attention, but paused to deliver a parting observation that revealed his assumptions about her capabilities. "And Sarah, try to keep the cost reasonable this time. I know you women like to find expensive problems that don't actually exist." Sarah watched Jake leave through the plate glass window, noting the way he strutted to his personal truck with the confidence of someone who'd never been forced to question his own assumptions about competence and capability. She'd encountered thousands of Jake Morrisons during her 30 years in Millbrook, men who viewed her technical knowledge as a mysterious but ultimately subordinate skill set that existed primarily to serve their convenience. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What Jake Morrison didn't know, and what Sarah intended to keep secret, was that she could strip and reassemble his Suburban's engine faster than most factory technicians, diagnose electrical problems that stumped dealership service departments, and perform precision mechanical work that required mathematical calculations he couldn't comprehend. Her understanding of internal combustion engines extended to modifications that could increase horsepower by 40% while maintaining reliability standards that exceeded manufacturer specifications. More importantly, Jake Morrison had no idea that Sarah Chen possessed skills that had once made her one of the most valuable military assets in the Balkans theater of operations. During her 8 years of active duty, she'd recorded confirmed kills at distances that belonged in legend rather than official documentation. Her precision shooting abilities had saved American lives, eliminated high-value targets, and contributed to mission successes that remained classified decades after. Her discharge. The morning brought its usual parade of customers who reinforced Sarah's understanding that invisibility was her most valuable asset. Betty Rodriguez arrived with her ancient Honda Civic, its transmission slipping badly enough to threaten her ability to drive to work at the county courthouse. Betty worked as a clerk in the property records office, filing documents and answering phones for supervisors who rarely acknowledged her existence beyond functional necessity. "Sarah, honey, I don't know what I'm going to do if this car dies, Betty confided while Sarah examined the transmission fluid, which had turned the distinctive black color that indicated serious internal damage. I can't afford car payments. But I can't afford to miss work either. Is there anything you can do to keep it running just a little longer? Her voice carried the desperation of someone who understood that automotive failure could trigger financial catastrophe. Sarah studied the Honda with professional assessment that went far beyond Betty's immediate problem. The transmission was indeed failing, but Sarah could see ways to extend its life through modifications that would cost Betty less than $50 in parts. The solution required understanding hydraulic pressure dynamics and friction material properties that most mechanics learned through expensive factory training, but Sarah had acquired equivalent knowledge through military vehicle maintenance that had demanded keeping equipment operational under combat conditions. Betty, I can rebuild the valve body for about $40 in parts, Sarah explained, her tone carefully modulated to sound helpful without appearing too knowledgeable. It won't fix everything, but it should give you another year or two before you need to think about replacement. She avoided mentioning that her proposed solution was actually superior to factory specifications, or that she could perform the work faster and more accurately than dealership technicians who charged 10 times her labor rate. Betty's relief was visible as she processed Sarah's estimate, which represented financial salvation rather than catastrophe. You're an angel, Sarah. I don't know how you always manage to find ways to fix things that other mechanics say are hopeless. She paused, studying Sarah with curiosity that suggested she'd noticed patterns in Sarah's capabilities that didn't quite fit her expectations about small-town automotive repair. Just experience, Sarah replied, deflecting attention from skills that she couldn't explain without revealing background that would destroy her carefully constructed anonymity. 30 years of working on the same types of problems teaches you shortcuts that save time and money. The explanation was technically accurate, while omitting the fact that her shortcuts were based on engineering principles learned through military training that had prepared her for much more complex challenges than civilian automotive repair. The afternoon shift brought different challenges as Sarah juggled multiple repair projects while maintaining the appearance of being perpetually overwhelmed by work that she could actually complete in half the estimated time. She'd learned that finishing jobs too quickly raised questions about her efficiency that could lead to scrutiny of her methods and capabilities. Better to appear adequately competent rather than suspiciously skilled. Danny Williams arrived with his modified pickup truck, its engine producing the distinctive knock that indicated serious internal damage from his attempts at performance enhancement. Danny was 19 years old with more enthusiasm than knowledge, typical of the young men who brought Sarah vehicles that had been damaged through experimentation with modifications they didn't understand. His truck represented weeks of parts, purchases and weekend labor that had resulted in mechanical problems he couldn't diagnose or repair. Miss Chen, I think I might have messed something up pretty bad, Danny admitted, his voice carrying the embarrassment of someone who'd discovered that automotive modification required expertise beyond YouTube tutorials and parts catalog browsing. The engine's making weird noises, and it's not running right since I installed the new intake system. He gestured helplessly toward his truck, which was indeed producing sounds that indicated multiple serious problems. Sarah performed her diagnostic routine with practiced efficiency, immediately identifying the cascade of failures that Danny's modifications had created. He'd installed a cold air intake system without understanding how it would affect fuel delivery ratios, creating lean running conditions that had damaged pistons and valves. The turbocharger he'd added was producing boost pressures that exceeded the engine's structural capabilities, while his exhaust modifications had altered back pressure characteristics in ways that affected performance throughout the RPM range. Danny, you've got several problems that are all connected, Sarah explained, choosing her words carefully to avoid sounding condescending while providing education that might prevent future disasters. The intake modifications changed your air-fuel mixture, and the turbo is creating pressure that your engine wasn't designed to handle. We can fix it, but it's going to require undoing some of your modifications and making changes you probably didn't know were necessary. Danny's face fell as he processed the implications of Sarah's diagnosis. How much is this going to cost? And how did you figure all that out so fast? The guys at Precision Motorsports couldn't even tell me what was wrong, and they specialize in performance work. His question revealed genuine curiosity about Sarah's diagnostic abilities, which had exceeded those of specialists who charged premium rates for expertise they apparently didn't possess. Sarah deflected the question with practiced ease, having learned that demonstrations of superior knowledge often created suspicion rather than respect. Just lucky, I guess. Sometimes problems are easier to spot from a fresh perspective. She avoided mentioning that her understanding of internal combustion dynamics had been developed through military vehicle modification programs that had pushed engine performance far beyond civilian specifications, or that she could design turbocharger systems that would double Danny's horsepower while maintaining reliability. The truth was that Sarah Chen possessed automotive knowledge that would have impressed factory engineers and racing teams. Her military training had included advanced mechanical engineering concepts applied to vehicles that operated under extreme conditions where failure meant mission compromise or personnel casualties. She understood metallurgy, thermodynamics, and precision machining at levels that belonged in graduate engineering programs rather than small-town repair shops. As the day progressed, Sarah found herself managing the familiar tension between her desire to help customers and her need to maintain the carefully constructed mediocrity that protected her anonymity. Mrs. Patterson brought her Cadillac with electrical problems that had stumped 3 different shops, each of which had charged diagnostic fees while failing to identify the intermittent short circuit that was draining her battery. Sarah located and repaired the problem in 20 minutes, but spread the work across 3 days to avoid questions about why she could solve problems that had defeated certified technicians. Tom Bradley's diesel truck arrived with injection pump problems that required specialized diagnostic equipment most shops didn't possess. Sarah had built her own testing apparatus using components that weren't available through automotive suppliers, creating diagnostic capabilities that exceeded those of dealership service departments. She could analyze injection timing, fuel pressure, dynamics, and combustion efficiency with precision that belonged in engine development laboratories. But she presented her findings as educated guesses based on experience rather than scientific measurement. The pattern repeated throughout the day as Sarah encountered mechanical problems that allowed her to demonstrate just enough competence to satisfy her customers while concealing the true depth of her capabilities. She fixed transmission problems that required understanding hydraulic circuit analysis, diagnosed engine failures that demanded knowledge of metallurgical stress patterns, and repaired electrical systems that involved concepts from electromagnetic theory. Each successful repair reinforced her customers' perception of Sarah as a competent but unremarkable mechanic who somehow managed to solve problems through persistence and experience rather than advanced technical knowledge. They appreciated her reasonable prices and reliable work while remaining completely unaware that they were receiving service from someone whose expertise exceeded that of most automotive engineers. The day's final customer was Maria Santos, a single mother whose ancient minivan represented her family's only transportation to work and school. The van's engine was running rough, consuming oil at an alarming rate, and producing smoke that indicated serious internal problems. Maria couldn't afford major repairs, but she also couldn't afford the vehicle's failure, creating the type of impossible situation that Sarah encountered regularly in a community where economic survival often depended on keeping deteriorating vehicles operational. "Sarah, I know this van is probably not worth fixing, but I need it to last just until my tax refund comes in February," Maria explained, her voice carrying the stress of someone who understood that automotive failure could trigger a cascade of financial disasters. "Is there anything you can do to keep it running for a few more months?" She studied Sarah with the desperate hope of someone whose options had been reduced to prayer and mechanical miracles. Sarah examined the minivan with the systematic approach that had once made her the Marine Corps' most effective equipment specialist in theater operations. The engine had multiple serious problems that conventional repair would cost more than the vehicle's value, but Sarah could see ways to address the most critical issues through modifications that would extend its operational life without requiring major parts replacement. "Maria, the main problem is worn piston rings that are letting oil burn in the cylinders," Sarah explained, choosing technical language that was accurate but not intimidating. "I can't rebuild the engine economically, but I can modify the crankcase, ventilation system, and adjust the fuel delivery to reduce oil consumption and clean up the combustion. It won't fix everything, but it should get you through until spring." The solution Sarah proposed was actually more sophisticated than anything most shops would attempt, requiring understanding of internal combustion dynamics and emission control, systems that belonged in advanced automotive engineering courses. She could modify the PCV system to reduce cylinder pressure, adjust fuel injection timing to optimize combustion efficiency, and install aftermarket components that would improve the engine's oil management without requiring disassembly. Maria's gratitude was overwhelming as she processed Sarah's estimate, which represented hope rather than financial catastrophe. "You always find ways to help people that other mechanics say are impossible. How do you know so much about fixing things that are supposedly broken beyond repair?" Her question carried genuine curiosity about Sarah's problem-solving abilities, which consistently exceeded what she expected from small-town automotive service. Sarah smiled with the practiced humility she'd developed to deflect attention from capabilities that couldn't be explained through conventional civilian training. "Just trial and error over 30 years. You learn things that aren't in the textbooks when you work on enough different problems." The explanation was partly true while omitting the fact that her unconventional solutions were based on engineering principles learned through military programs that had demanded keeping equipment operational under conditions where failure wasn't an option. As evening approached and the garage emptied of customers, Sarah conducted her closing routine with the same methodical precision that characterized everything about her professional life. She secured tools according to a system that looked casual but actually followed security protocols designed to prevent unauthorized access to equipment that exceeded civilian specifications. Her computer records were updated with repair documentation that appeared routine but actually contained technical details that would have impressed automotive engineers. The day's receipts reflected the financial reality of small-town automotive repair. Modest profits derived from reasonable prices that allowed her customers to maintain vehicles they couldn't afford to replace. Sarah's business model prioritized community service over profit maximization, understanding that her neighbors' economic survival often depended on keeping aging vehicles operational through repairs that cost less than monthly payments on newer automobiles. But the financial statements didn't reflect the true value of Sarah's work, which extended far beyond simple automotive repair. She was maintaining the transportation infrastructure that allowed Millbrook's economy to function, providing technical solutions that kept her neighbors employed and mobile. Her expertise was preventing the economic disasters that automotive failure would create for families living paycheck to paycheck. More importantly, Sarah's 30 years in Millbrook had created a network of relationships and obligations that had transformed her from an outsider seeking anonymity into a community pillar whose disappearance would affect hundreds of people. She'd become irreplaceably valuable through daily acts of service that had accumulated into institutional importance. Though she'd accomplished this transformation while remaining virtually invisible to anyone beyond her immediate customers. The evening cleanup revealed the true scope of Sarah's capabilities as she reset her workspace for the following day. Her tool organization reflected military standards for equipment readiness, with every implement positioned for maximum efficiency during emergency operations. Her parts inventory was managed according to supply chain principles that ensured availability of critical components without excessive capital investment. Her maintenance schedules followed preventive protocols that kept her equipment operational at reliability levels that exceeded civilian standards. Sarah's personal vehicle, a modified Chevy pickup that looked appropriately beat up from the outside, contained mechanical and electronic systems that would have impressed military contractors. She'd rebuilt the engine to specifications that doubled its horsepower while maintaining perfect reliability, installed communication equipment that allowed encrypted contact with federal agencies, and added armor plating disguised as rust-prone. Body panels that could stop rifle rounds without revealing their presence. The drive home took Sarah through residential neighborhoods where she'd spent 3 decades, building relationships that had gradually transformed her from mysterious outsider into trusted community member. Children waved from front yards where she'd helped their parents fix lawnmowers and bicycles. Business owners nodded respectfully from sidewalks, where she'd assisted with commercial vehicle problems that threatened their economic survival. Her modest house on Elm Street reflected the same deliberate ordinariness that characterized everything about her public persona. The exterior was well-maintained but unremarkable, designed to blend into a neighborhood of similar working class. Homes owned by people who valued functionality over appearance. Her yard was neat without being obsessive, her mailbox properly positioned but not distinctive, her outdoor lighting adequate without being suspicious. Inside, Sarah's home revealed hints of capabilities that she couldn't entirely conceal. Her bookshelf contained technical manuals that belonged in engineering libraries rather than civilian residences. Her workshop was equipped with precision instruments that exceeded what most professional machinists possessed. Her communication equipment allowed contact with federal agencies and military installations that civilian contractors rarely accessed. But the most revealing aspect of Sarah's home was what it didn't contain: photographs, awards, or memorabilia that would indicate her military service and combat experience. She deliberately eliminated evidence of her past achievements, creating an environment that supported her constructed identity as a civilian mechanic whose knowledge came from experience rather than formal training. The evening news brought reports from overseas operations that reminded Sarah of capabilities she'd sworn never to use again. Military units engaged in precision operations that required skills she'd once possessed. Soldiers facing challenges that she'd been trained to overcome, situations that would have once demanded her immediate deployment to theater. She watched with the detached interest of someone whose previous life had been permanently severed from current responsibilities. Her secure phone remained silent, having been quiet for nearly 2 years since her last consultation with federal agencies that occasionally required her expertise for special projects. Sarah preferred the silence, understanding that communication from her former contacts usually indicated situations dangerous enough to require capabilities that belonged in her past rather than her present. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah reflected on the day's interactions and the careful balance she maintained between helping her community and protecting the anonymity that allowed her to remain in Millbrook. Each successful repair strengthened her relationships while revealing just enough competence to satisfy her customers without exposing skills that would raise questions about her background and training. The routine would repeat tomorrow, bringing new challenges that would test her ability to provide solutions without revealing the true extent of her capabilities. Sarah Chen would continue fixing cars and solving problems, maintaining her role as the unremarkable mechanic who somehow managed to accomplish repairs that other shops found impossible. But in the darkness of her bedroom, surrounded by equipment that could transform her back into Staff Sergeant Chen within minutes, Sarah understood that her carefully constructed invisibility might someday be challenged by circumstances that demanded the revelation of capabilities she'd spent 30 years concealing. The warrior remained ready beneath the mechanic's coveralls, waiting for orders that she hoped would never come. The last thing Sarah saw before sleep was the emergency communications device that would activate only for situations requiring immediate response to threats against American personnel. The device had been silent for 27 months, and Sarah intended to keep it that way. Some skills were too dangerous to use except when lives depended on their deployment. Tomorrow would bring more broken transmissions and failing engines. More customers who needed affordable repairs to keep their lives functioning. Sarah would continue serving her community through the modest application of extraordinary capabilities, maintaining the balance between visibility and anonymity that had protected her for 3 decades. The invisible expert would remain invisible, at least until circumstances arose that demanded the emergence of someone whose true capabilities could reshape everything about how her neighbors understood competence, service, and the hidden potential that walked among them in plain sight. The first sign that Sarah's carefully maintained facade was beginning to show strain came on a Tuesday morning when Deputy Sheriff Kevin Martinez brought his patrol cruiser in for what should have been routine maintenance. The vehicle had been experiencing intermittent electrical failures that were affecting his radio communications, a problem that had frustrated the county's certified police vehicle technicians for 3 weeks without resolution. Sarah examined the Crown Victoria with the systematic approach she applied to all diagnostic challenges. But this particular problem required knowledge that extended far beyond civilian automotive systems. Police communications equipment operated on frequencies and protocols that were regulated by federal agencies, and the interference patterns suggested problems with electromagnetic shielding that most mechanics would never encounter in standard repair work. Deputy Martinez, your radio interference is being caused by a ground loop in the emergency lighting circuit, Sarah explained after 20 minutes of investigation that had revealed problems the certified technicians had missed entirely. Someone installed an aftermarket light bar without proper isolation, and it's creating electromagnetic interference that's affecting your communication systems. She pointed to modifications that had been made without understanding their impact on sensitive electronic equipment. Martinez studied Sarah with new attention, recognizing that her diagnosis was far more sophisticated than anything he'd heard from the specialists who'd worked on his vehicle previously. How did you figure that out so fast? The guys at the county garage had been working on this for weeks, and they kept saying it was probably a bad radio. His tone carried professional curiosity about technical capabilities that seemed inconsistent with his assumptions about small-town automotive repair. Sarah realized she'd demonstrated knowledge that revealed familiarity with law, ENFORCEMENT, equipment specifications, and electromagnetic compatibility requirements that civilian mechanics rarely encountered. Her explanation had been too precise, too immediate, and too technically sophisticated for someone whose expertise was supposed to come from general automotive experience rather than specialized training. Lucky guess, I suppose, Sarah deflected, though she could see that Martinez wasn't entirely convinced by her casual dismissal of capabilities that had impressed someone with law enforcement technical training. I've seen similar problems with CB radio installations that create interference with other electronics. The explanation was plausible but didn't entirely satisfy Martinez's growing suspicions about her diagnostic abilities. The repair itself required Sarah to demonstrate additional knowledge that further contradicted her constructed persona. She needed to understand FCC regulations governing emergency communications equipment, federal specifications for electromagnetic compatibility, in law enforcement vehicles and technical standards that were established by agencies rather than automotive manufacturers. Her work was completed with precision that exceeded what Martinez had seen from certified police vehicle specialists. Martinez returned the following week with his personal vehicle, but Sarah sensed that his real purpose was observing her work methods rather than addressing any mechanical problems. He lingered in the garage longer than necessary, asking questions about her diagnostic procedures and equipment that seemed designed to test her knowledge, rather than satisfy genuine curiosity. About automotive repair. Sarah, you seem to know a lot about police equipment for someone who works on civilian vehicles, Martinez observed while watching her perform routine maintenance on his truck. Have you done much work on law enforcement vehicles, or is this something you picked up through general experience? His question was posed casually, but Sarah recognized the investigative technique of someone trained to gather information through seemingly innocent conversation. The deputy's interest represented exactly the type of scrutiny that Sarah had spent 30 years avoiding. Law enforcement personnel were trained to notice inconsistencies and investigate anomalies, making them particularly dangerous to someone whose cover story couldn't withstand professional examination. Martinez's background included military police service that had taught him to recognize capabilities that didn't match official records or stated qualifications. Sarah's response was carefully calibrated to satisfy Martinez's curiosity without providing information that could lead to deeper investigation. I've worked on a few sheriff's department vehicles over the years when they needed quick repairs, she explained, which was technically true while omitting the fact that her knowledge came from military communication systems that were far more sophisticated than civilian law enforcement equipment. But Martinez's suspicions had been aroused by capabilities that exceeded his expectations, and he began making inquiries that revealed patterns in Sarah's work that seemed inconsistent with her background and position. He discovered that she'd solved technical problems for the fire department, completed complex repairs for the highway patrol, and provided diagnostic services for federal agencies that occasionally operated in the area. The second incident that threatened Sarah's anonymity occurred when Dr. Rebecca Foster brought her Mercedes to the garage with engine problems that had stumped the dealership service department. The vehicle was experiencing power loss and rough running that indicated sophisticated electronic control system failures, problems that required diagnostic equipment and technical knowledge that exceeded what most independent shops possessed. Dr. Foster was Millbrook's only physician, having moved to the area after completing her residency at Johns Hopkins University. Her medical background had trained her to recognize expertise and competence, making her particularly observant about technical capabilities that seemed inconsistent with expected qualifications. She'd brought her vehicle to Sarah after the dealership had failed to diagnose problems that were affecting her ability to reach patients in rural areas. Sarah's examination of the Mercedes revealed multiple issues with the engine management system that would have challenged dealership technicians with specialized training and expensive diagnostic equipment. The problems involved software glitches, sensor calibration errors, and communication protocol failures between different electronic modules, issues that required understanding computer systems and programming, concepts that belonged in advanced technical training rather than traditional automotive repair. Dr. Foster, your engine control module has corrupted calibration data that's affecting sensor interpretation and fuel delivery calculations, Sarah explained after completing diagnostic procedures that had taken less than an hour. The dealership probably couldn't find the problem because it requires accessing manufacturer programming protocols that aren't covered in standard training courses. Her diagnosis was delivered with confidence that reflected extensive experience with similar systems. Dr. Foster studied Sarah with the analytical attention that medical training had developed for assessing competence and knowledge. That's an extremely sophisticated diagnosis that involves understanding computer programming and Electronic systems integration. Where did you learn about automotive computer systems at that level of detail? Her question carried professional curiosity about technical capabilities that seemed to exceed what she expected from small-town automotive repair. Sarah recognized that she'd again demonstrated knowledge that contradicted her constructed persona, revealing familiarity with advanced computer systems and programming concepts that civilian mechanics rarely possessed. Her diagnostic procedures had utilized equipment and techniques that belonged in engineering laboratories rather than general automotive repair shops, and Dr. Foster's medical background had prepared her to recognize expertise that exceeded stated qualifications. Self-taught mostly, Sarah replied, attempting to deflect attention from capabilities she couldn't explain without revealing background that would destroy her carefully maintained anonymity. Modern vehicles are basically computers with wheels, so you have to learn programming concepts to fix anything complicated. The explanation was accurate but incomplete, omitting the fact that her computer expertise had been developed through military systems that were far more complex than civilian automotive applications. The repair work itself required Sarah to demonstrate additional capabilities that further impressed Dr. Foster while raising more questions about her background and training. She needed to reprogram the engine control module using software that wasn't available through normal civilian channels, modify calibration parameters that required understanding manufacturer specifications, and verify repairs using diagnostic protocols that belonged in advanced technical certification programs. Dr. Foster returned several times over the following months, bringing vehicles belonging to other medical professionals who were impressed by Sarah's ability to solve problems that had defeated dealership service departments. Each successful repair enhanced her reputation while simultaneously increasing scrutiny from educated professionals who recognized that her capabilities exceeded what they expected from someone with her stated background and qualifications. The growing attention from law enforcement and medical professionals created exactly the type of visibility that Sarah had spent decades avoiding. Her diagnostic abilities and repair techniques were beginning to attract notice from people whose professional training had prepared them to recognize competence and expertise, making them potentially dangerous to someone whose cover story couldn't withstand educated examination. The third major crack in Sarah's facade occurred when Colonel James Richardson, recently retired from the Army Corps of Engineers, moved to Millbrook and brought his modified Jeep to her garage for maintenance. Richardson had spent 30 years in military engineering, giving him extensive experience with technical systems and equipment that exceeded civilian specifications. His background included classified projects and advanced engineering applications that had prepared him to recognize capabilities that suggested military training. Richardson's Jeep had been modified with communication equipment, navigation systems, and mechanical components that reflected his military background and continued involvement in federal consulting projects. The vehicle required maintenance that involved understanding electromagnetic compatibility, secure communications protocols, and precision mechanical systems that belonged in military applications rather than civilian automotive repair. Sarah's work on Richardson's Jeep revealed knowledge that immediately caught his attention and aroused his professional suspicions. She understood military communication protocols, recognized classified equipment configurations, and demonstrated familiarity with technical standards that were established by defense agencies rather than civilian authorities. Her diagnostic procedures and repair techniques reflected training that exceeded what civilian schools provided. Ms. Chen, you seem very familiar with military communication systems and electronic warfare equipment, Richardson observed after watching Sarah work on his vehicle's sophisticated electronic systems. Have you had experience with defense contractors or military technical training? His question was posed with the directness of someone accustomed to security clearances and classified information. recognizing capabilities that suggested background checks in federal authorization. Sarah found herself facing exactly the type of scrutiny she'd hoped to avoid, confronted by someone whose military experience had prepared him to recognize training and capabilities that contradicted her constructed civilian identity. Richardson's background included counterintelligence, training that had taught him to identify inconsistencies and investigate anomalies that might indicate hidden agendas or concealed identities. Her response needed to satisfy Richardson's suspicions, without providing information that could lead to investigation of her actual background and military service record. "I've done some work for government agencies over the years," she admitted, which was technically accurate while omitting the nature and extent of her federal involvement. Nothing classified, just maintenance contracts that required security clearances for base access. Richardson accepted her explanation with professional courtesy, but Sarah could see that her answer had only partially satisfied his curiosity, while confirming his suspicions that she possessed capabilities that exceeded her stated qualifications. His military background had taught him to recognize evasion and deflection, making him potentially dangerous to someone whose survival depended on maintaining carefully constructed anonymity. The colonel began making regular visits to Sarah's garage, bringing vehicles that didn't require significant repairs but that allowed him to observe her work methods and technical capabilities. His presence created constant pressure as Sarah struggled to demonstrate sufficient competence to satisfy his mechanical needs while concealing knowledge that would reveal her actual background and training. Richardson's inquiries extended beyond casual conversation to include questions about her equipment, training, and professional experience that seemed designed to test her cover story rather than satisfy genuine curiosity about automotive repair. His military background had taught him investigative techniques that could uncover inconsistencies in constructed identities, making him potentially dangerous to someone whose anonymity was essential for survival. The cumulative effect of increased scrutiny from law enforcement, medical professionals, and military personnel was creating exactly the type of attention that Sarah had spent 30 years avoiding. Her exceptional diagnostic abilities and repair techniques were beginning to attract notice from educated professionals who recognized that her capabilities exceeded what they expected from someone with her stated background. The situation deteriorated further when Martinez began sharing information with other law enforcement personnel about Sarah's unusual technical capabilities and knowledge of police equipment. His inquiries had revealed that she'd provided diagnostic services for multiple agencies, solved problems that had frustrated certified technicians, and demonstrated familiarity with law enforcement systems that seemed inconsistent with civilian automotive experience. Dr. Foster had begun recommending Sarah's services to other medical professionals, creating a network of educated customers who appreciated her technical expertise, while questioning how a small-town mechanic had acquired knowledge that exceeded what civilian training typically provided. Their conversations revealed growing curiosity about her background and qualifications that threatened to expose inconsistencies in her constructed identity. Colonel Richardson's presence in the community had attracted attention from other military retirees and federal employees who recognized his vehicle modifications and began bringing their own specialized equipment to Sarah's garage. Their collective scrutiny was creating pressure that threatened to expose capabilities and knowledge that belonged in classified military applications rather than civilian automotive repair. Sarah found herself managing an increasingly complex web of relationships and obligations that required her to demonstrate sufficient expertise to satisfy her customers' needs while concealing knowledge that would raise questions about her actual background and training. Each successful repair enhanced her reputation while simultaneously increasing scrutiny from people whose professional experience had prepared them to recognize capabilities that exceeded stated qualifications. The breaking point arrived when Martinez, Dr. Foster, and Colonel Richardson began comparing notes about Sarah's unusual capabilities and discussing their shared suspicions that she possessed training and experience that contradicted her constructed civilian identity. Their conversations revealed patterns in her knowledge and techniques that suggested military background and federal involvement that she'd never acknowledged or explained. Martinez had documented instances where Sarah had demonstrated familiarity with law enforcement equipment, protocols, and technical standards that civilian mechanics rarely encountered. Dr. Foster had observed diagnostic procedures and repair techniques that required understanding computer systems and programming concepts that exceeded civilian automotive training. Richardson had recognized knowledge of military communication systems and electronic warfare equipment that suggested security clearances and classified training. Their informal investigation was beginning to reveal inconsistencies in Sarah's cover story that threatened to expose her actual identity and background. The three professionals represented exactly the type of educated, experienced individuals who could uncover carefully constructed anonymity through systematic observation and analysis of capabilities that exceeded stated qualifications. Sarah realized that her 30 years of careful invisibility were being challenged by circumstances that demanded either revelation of her true capabilities or departure from the community she'd grown to value. The pressure was mounting from multiple sources simultaneously, creating a situation that couldn't be resolved through continued deflection and evasion. The final straw came when Richardson announced that he'd recommended Sarah's services to contacts in federal agencies who were impressed by his reports of her technical capabilities and interested in meeting someone who could solve problems that had frustrated certified specialists. His recommendation threatened to bring exactly the type of federal attention that Sarah had spent decades avoiding. Federal investigation of her capabilities would inevitably reveal inconsistencies between her constructed civilian identity and her actual military background, exposing the carefully maintained anonymity that had protected her from enemies who'd once sought her elimination. Richardson's well-intentioned recommendation represented an existential threat to the life she'd built in Millbrook. Sarah understood that she was approaching a decision point that would determine whether she could continue her current existence or would be forced to abandon everything she'd built in Millbrook. The increasing scrutiny from law enforcement, medical professionals, and military personnel was creating pressure that couldn't be sustained indefinitely without either revelation or departure. Her secure communication device remained silent, but Sarah knew that federal attention would eventually lead to contact from agencies that had maintained her security clearances for potential consultation on specialized projects. Once federal involvement began, maintaining her constructed anonymity would become impossible. The quiet mechanic who'd spent 30 years fixing cars and serving her community was facing circumstances that threatened to expose capabilities she'd hoped never to reveal. The invisible expert was becoming visible through the accumulation of small demonstrations that had impressed educated observers beyond their ability to ignore or dismiss. Sarah's carefully constructed world was beginning to crack under pressure from people who recognized competence and expertise, threatening to reveal the warrior who'd been hidden beneath the mechanic's coveralls for 3 decades. The peaceful existence she'd built in Millbrook was facing challenges that demanded either transformation or abandonment. The cracks were spreading, and Sarah knew that eventually they would either heal through continued careful management or widen until they revealed everything she'd worked to conceal. The choice between visibility and departure was approaching with the inevitability of circumstances beyond her control. The invisible woman was being forced toward visibility by people who recognized excellence and couldn't ignore capabilities that exceeded their expectations about small-town automotive repair. Sarah Chen was about to discover whether her carefully constructed anonymity could survive the attention of professionals trained to recognize training and expertise that contradicted stated qualifications and constructed identities. The emergency Alert pierced through Sarah's garage at 11:43 a.m. on a Thursday morning that had started like any other, transforming her world from routine automotive repair to life-or-death crisis management in the span of 17 seconds. The secure communication device hidden beneath her workbench erupted with the distinctive tone reserved for situations requiring immediate federal response, a sound Sarah hadn't heard in over 2 years and had hoped never to hear again. Sarah's hands stilled on the carburetor she'd been rebuilding as the coded transmission filled her workshop with urgency that belonged in military command centers rather than small-town repair shops. The automated voice delivered coordinates, threat assessments, and operational parameters with mechanical precision that reminded her of missions she'd completed in theaters where American lives depended on capabilities that few possessed. Priority Alpha Emergency Activation. Personnel Asset Designation Ghost 7 required for immediate tactical support. Hostile engagement in progress. Coordinates 34, 0522 North, 69, 1747 East. Multiple American casualties confirmed. Long range. Precision engagement required distance approximately 1,847 meters. Environmental conditions adverse. Standard assets unavailable. Authorization code Bravo 77 Charlie. Respond immediately. The coordinates placed the crisis in Afghanistan's Kunar province, where mountainous terrain and hostile forces had created a tactical nightmare that conventional military resources couldn't resolve. American forces were pinned down by enemy positions that couldn't be neutralized through standard artillery or air support due to proximity to civilian structures and geographical limitations that favored defenders over attackers. Sarah accessed her secure computer terminal, fingers moving across encrypted keyboards with muscle memory that transported her back to military operations centers, where seconds determined mission success or catastrophic failure. Satellite imagery revealed the tactical situation with clarity that made her stomach clench with professional recognition of an impossible scenario, requiring capabilities that belonged in her classified past rather than her civilian present. 2nd Platoon, Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines were trapped in a valley position approximately 12 kilometers northeast of Forward Operating Base Chapman. Enemy forces had established overlapping fields of fire from elevated positions that provided natural cover while offering clear lines of sight to American positions below. The Marines had sustained multiple casualties during an ambush that had evolved into a siege situation with no apparent resolution through conventional tactics. The enemy had positioned heavy weapons in defensive positions that couldn't be approached through ground assault due to terrain advantages and interlocking fire zones that would result in prohibitive casualties among attacking forces. Air support was unavailable due to weather conditions that grounded helicopters and made fixed-wing precision strikes impossible without unacceptable risk to civilian populations in nearby villages. Artillery support was ineffective due to the elevation differences and geographical features that provided natural protection for enemy positions while leaving American forces exposed in the valley below. The Marines were running low on ammunition and medical supplies while facing enemy forces that were prepared for extended siege operations with prepared defensive positions and supply lines that remained intact. Sarah studied the tactical data with professional assessment that revealed why conventional military assets couldn't resolve the crisis. The enemy positions were located at distances exceeding the effective range of standard infantry weapons while being positioned in terrain that prevented approach by ground forces. The geographical advantages favored defenders who could maintain suppressive fire while remaining protected from return engagement. The only viable solution required precision engagement from extreme range, using specialized equipment and training that few military personnel possessed. The enemy positions needed to be neutralized through individual marksmanship rather than area bombardment, requiring shots that exceeded the capabilities of standard military marksmen, under conditions that would challenge even elite specialists. Sarah's federal consultation status had remained active despite her civilian employment, maintaining security clearances and equipment authorizations that allowed immediate deployment for situations requiring her unique capabilities. Federal agencies had invested too much in her training and proven performance to allow those assets to remain completely inactive, particularly when situations arose that demanded skills possessed by only a handful of individuals worldwide. The tactical challenge was compounded by environmental conditions that made precision shooting exponentially more difficult. Wind speeds in the target area were gusting between 25 and 40 miles per hour with variable directions that would affect bullet trajectories significantly. Temperature was 97 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity levels that would impact ballistic performance and scope clarity during extended operations. The shooting positions available to Sarah would require engaging targets at a distance of 1,847 meters, while compensating for elevation differences of approximately 800 feet between her position and the enemy locations. The shots would need to be made at extreme upward angles through atmospheric conditions that would challenge even the most advanced ballistic calculation systems. Sarah's secure transportation was already en route to Millbrook with federal assets, converging on her location to provide immediate deployment capability to the crisis zone. Military transport aircraft were being prepared for emergency insertion with specialized equipment and support personnel that would allow her to operate at maximum effectiveness under extreme conditions. The weight of federal authority was being brought to bear on a situation that had exhausted conventional options while American lives hung in the balance. Sarah's classification as a strategic national asset meant that her deployment took priority over normal operational protocols, with resources being diverted from other missions to support her immediate transportation and operational requirements. But Sarah faced a decision that transcended military obligation and federal authority. Accepting the mission would require abandoning the civilian identity she'd spent 30 years constructing while revealing capabilities that would destroy her anonymity permanently. The quiet mechanic would disappear forever, replaced by the acknowledgement that she'd been maintaining military readiness throughout her supposed retirement from active service. The community she'd grown to love would discover that their trusted automotive repair specialist had been conducting a 30-year deception, concealing identity and capabilities that belonged in classified military operations rather than civilian service. Her neighbors would learn that every interaction had been managed according to security protocols, designed to maintain cover rather than genuine personal relationship. Deputy Martinez, Dr. Foster, and Colonel Richardson would realize that their growing suspicions about her capabilities had been completely accurate, and that her deflections and evasions had been protecting federal secrets rather than personal privacy. The trust she'd built through decades of reliable service would be shattered by the revelation that her entire civilian persona had been constructed to conceal military assets and ongoing federal involvement. Sarah's hands moved to the secure cabinet where her precision equipment waited in perfect readiness, maintained according to military specifications throughout her civilian years. The custom rifle that had never been fired in Millbrook was about to be deployed in anger for the first time since her official discharge from active military service, carrying with it the weight of capabilities that had been preserved through 3 decades of careful maintenance. Her ammunition reserves included specialized rounds designed for extreme range engagement under adverse conditions, cartridges that had been hand-loaded to specifications that exceeded commercial availability. Each round represented the culmination of ballistic science applied to precision shooting under conditions where environmental factors could mean the difference between mission success and American casualties. The ballistic computer that would calculate shooting solutions contained atmospheric modeling capabilities and environmental compensation, algorithms that belonged in advanced research laboratories rather than civilian applications. Sarah's equipment represented the convergence of multiple scientific disciplines applied to the single purpose of placing projectiles with surgical precision at distances that challenged the limits of human capability and mechanical accuracy. Federal logistics personnel were coordinating transportation that would place Sarah in Afghanistan within 18 hours of mission activation, utilizing military assets and priority routing that reflected the critical nature of her deployment. Specialized support teams were being assembled to provide real-time intelligence, communication support, and tactical coordination that would optimize her operational effectiveness. The mission profile demanded capabilities that existed at the intersection of advanced marksmanship, environmental science, and mathematical precision applied under combat stress that would test every aspect of her training and experience. Sarah would be required to perform at levels that exceeded her previous military service, while operating under conditions that offered no margin for error or opportunity for correction. Sarah stood in her garage surrounded by the tools and equipment of civilian automotive repair while contemplating the transition back to military operations that would end her civilian existence permanently. The federal government was offering her the opportunity to save American lives through application of capabilities that few possessed. But accepting the mission would require sacrificing everything she'd built in Millbrook. The emergency communication device continued transmitting updated tactical information that revealed the deteriorating situation faced by the trapped Marines. Enemy forces were increasing pressure while American ammunition supplies dwindled toward critically low levels. Medical casualties were mounting while evacuation remained impossible due to the tactical situation and enemy fire control over potential landing zones. Time was running out for 2nd Platoon as their tactical position became increasingly untenable. Conventional military resources had exhausted available options, while political considerations prevented deployment of assets that might resolve the situation through overwhelming force application. Sarah's precision capabilities represented the only viable option for neutralizing enemy positions without unacceptable collateral damage or political consequences. The federal authorization codes being transmitted carried presidential-level authority that overrode normal operational chains of command and resource allocation procedures. Sarah's deployment was being treated as a national security priority that justified extraordinary measures and resource commitment, regardless of cost or logistical complexity. Sarah's decision crystallized as she processed the tactical information and understood that 12 Marines were facing almost certain death without intervention that only she could provide. Her personal concerns about anonymity and civilian identity became secondary to immediate responsibility for American lives that depended on capabilities she'd maintained throughout her supposed retirement from military service. She activated her response protocol, transmitting acceptance codes that would trigger immediate federal deployment procedures while simultaneously ending her civilian existence in Millbrook. Sarah Chen, the automotive mechanic, was about to disappear forever, replaced by Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, whose precision shooting capabilities were needed to save Marines who faced impossible odds against enemy positions that couldn't be neutralized through conventional means. The transformation began immediately as Sarah secured her civilian workspace and accessed her military equipment with efficiency that reflected decades of readiness maintenance. Her civilian coveralls were replaced by combat utilities that had been maintained in perfect condition despite never being worn in Millbrook. Her automotive tools were secured while precision shooting equipment was prepared for immediate deployment. Through her scope, she could see the trapped Marines huddled behind insufficient cover while muzzle flashes erupted from 3 distinct enemy positions carved into the mountainside. The Taliban fighters had chosen their ground perfectly, establishing overlapping fields of fire that made any movement suicidal while remaining protected from conventional Assault by terrain that favored defenders absolutely. Sarah's first target was a heavy machine gun nest, positioned 1,847 meters northeast of her location, elevated 800 feet above the valley floor where the Marines fought for survival. The gunner was protected by sandbags and rock formations that left only his head and shoulders exposed for approximately 3 seconds, every 45 seconds when he shifted positions to acquire new targets. Her breathing settled into the rhythm that had once made her the most feared precision shooter in 3 theaters of operation. The crosshairs tracked the predicted movement pattern while her finger found the trigger with pressure that had been calibrated through thousands of practice sessions spanning 30 years. The mathematical calculations were complete, environmental factors compensated, and the shot sequence initiated with mechanical precision that transcended conscious thought. The Barrett's .50 caliber round erupted from the muzzle at 2,800 feet per second, beginning its trajectory through atmospheric conditions that would test every aspect of Sarah's ballistic calculations. The projectile arced through mountain air while compensating for gravitational drop, wind drift, and atmospheric density variations that affected velocity and accuracy at extreme range. Sarah maintained her sight picture through the recoil cycle, watching through her scope as the round struck the target with surgical precision that ended the machine gun threat instantly. The enemy gunner's position fell silent as the heavy weapon that had been pinning down the Marines was neutralized through marksmanship that belonged in military legend rather than contemporary combat operations. Her second target was positioned 1,923 meters to the southeast, requiring adjustment for increased range and different environmental conditions. The Taliban sniper had been methodically engaging Marines with precision that suggested advanced training and quality equipment, making him the most dangerous individual threat on the battlefield. His position behind a boulder formation provided excellent protection while offering limited shooting windows that demanded perfect timing and execution. Sarah's calculations accounted for the increased distance, while compensating for altitude differences and wind patterns that varied between her position and the target area. The shot would require leading the target's movement while adjusting for environmental factors that changed continuously throughout the projectile's flight path. Her ballistic solution pushed the limits of what was possible even with the most advanced equipment and training. The second round left her rifle with identical precision, following a trajectory calculated to intersect with the target's position. During the brief window when he was exposed to acquire his next Marine victim, Sarah's mathematical predictions proved accurate as the projectile found its mark with finality that eliminated the precision threat that had been systematically reducing Marine combat effectiveness. The third enemy position presented the most challenging shot of her military career, requiring engagement at 2,104 meters, while compensating for terrain features that created unpredictable wind patterns and atmospheric turbulence. The Taliban commander coordinating the ambush was protected by natural rock formations that provided nearly complete concealment except for momentary exposures when he moved between communication positions. Sarah's final calculations incorporated every environmental variable while accounting for the extended range that pushed her equipment beyond its design specifications. The shot would require perfect execution under conditions that offered no margin for error, with American lives depending on precision that existed at the absolute limits of human capability and mechanical accuracy. Her breathing paused at the natural respiratory interval while her finger applied steady pressure to the trigger mechanism. The Barrett's final round began its journey through mountain air that carried the weight of 12 American lives and the culmination of capabilities that had been maintained through 30 years of civilian concealment. The projectile followed its calculated path with precision that validated every hour of training and preparation that had prepared Sarah for this moment. The round struck its target with accuracy that ended the coordinated Assault while providing the trapped Marines with the opportunity they needed to break contact and reach extraction positions. Enemy fire ceased as the command structure collapsed, allowing American forces to withdraw with their wounded while Sarah provided overwatch that ensured their safe passage to evacuation zones. Radio communications confirmed mission success as the Marines reached safety with casualties that had been stabilized through medical intervention that wouldn't have been possible without Sarah's precision engagement of enemy positions. 12. American lives had been saved through application of capabilities that existed at the convergence of advanced training, specialized equipment, and mathematical precision applied under impossible conditions. Sarah's extraction was conducted with efficiency that reflected federal appreciation for assets whose capabilities warranted extraordinary protection and resource commitment. Military transport delivered her back to American soil while congressional committees prepared recognition that would acknowledge her contributions to national security through applications of skills that belonged in classified legend rather than public acknowledgement. Her return to Millbrook 3 days later brought Sarah back to a community that had been fundamentally transformed by the revelation of her true identity and capabilities. The quiet automotive mechanic who had served them for 30 years was revealed as a federal asset whose precision shooting abilities had been maintained throughout her civilian existence while concealing military readiness that belonged in classified operations. Deputy Martinez greeted her with professional respect that acknowledged capabilities he'd suspected but never imagined in their full scope. "Sarah, or should I say Staff Sergeant Chen, I have to admit that your automotive diagnostic abilities make a lot more sense now that we know about your actual background and training." His tone carried appreciation for someone whose true qualifications exceeded anything he'd encountered in civilian law enforcement. Dr. Foster approached with medical curiosity about stress management and performance under pressure that belonged in advanced psychological research rather than small-town social interaction. "Sarah, I've been reading about the physiological demands of precision shooting under combat stress. How do you maintain fine motor control and mathematical calculation under conditions that would incapacitate most people through adrenaline overload?" Colonel Richardson's reaction reflected military recognition of capabilities that he'd suspected but hadn't fully appreciated until federal deployment confirmed the scope of Sarah's training and operational experience. "Sergeant Chen, I should have realized that your technical knowledge indicated advanced military specialization rather than civilian automotive experience. Your precision equipment maintenance and diagnostic procedures reflected training that belonged in special operations rather than general mechanical repair." The community's response evolved from initial shock to overwhelming appreciation as Sarah's neighbors processed the reality that their trusted mechanic had been maintaining capabilities that had saved American lives while serving their automotive needs through 3 decades of community integration. Her revelation transformed their understanding of service and sacrifice, while demonstrating that extraordinary capabilities often walked among them in ordinary disguise. Federal transport vehicles arrived at her garage within 47 minutes of mission activation, carrying personnel and equipment that would support her immediate deployment to the combat zone. The quiet street outside Chun's Auto Repair was suddenly filled with military assets and federal agents whose presence announced that something extraordinary was happening in their ordinary small town. Sarah's neighbors gathered to witness the unprecedented federal response that was transforming their familiar automotive repair shop into a military staging area. Deputy Martinez, Dr. Foster, and Colonel Richardson observed with professional recognition that their suspicions about Sarah's capabilities had been dramatically understated rather than excessive. The woman they'd known as a competent but unremarkable mechanic was revealed as a federal asset whose capabilities warranted presidential-level deployment authorization and military transport priority. Their casual assumptions about small-town automotive repair were being shattered by evidence that they'd been interacting with someone whose true capabilities belonged in classified military operations. Jake Morrison arrived at his construction site to discover that his reliable mechanic was being transported by federal agents for reasons that no one could explain. Betty Rodriguez learned that the woman who'd kept her Honda running was apparently valuable enough to warrant immediate military deployment. Danny Williams realized that his automotive advisor possessed capabilities that exceeded anything he'd imagined possible. The entire community was forced to confront the reality that they'd been interacting with someone whose true identity and capabilities had been concealed through 30 years of careful deception. Sarah Chen had been maintaining federal readiness, while appearing to be nothing more than a competent automotive repair specialist whose technical knowledge came from civilian experience rather than classified military training. Sarah's departure from Millbrook was conducted with efficiency that reflected emergency protocols designed for rapid deployment of strategic assets. Her civilian identity was being permanently abandoned as federal requirements took priority over personal preferences for anonymity and community integration. The quiet mechanic was disappearing into military transport that would deliver her to combat operations where American lives depended on her willingness to reveal capabilities she'd hoped never to use again. As her aircraft lifted off from the emergency landing strip that had been established at Millbrook's municipal airport, Sarah watched her community disappear below while understanding that she would never return as the person her neighbors had known. The federal mission was ending her civilian existence while demanding the resurrection of military capabilities that belonged in her classified past. The invisible woman was becoming permanently visible as circumstances demanded the application of skills that few possessed under conditions that would test every aspect of her training and experience. Sarah Chen was returning to war as the precision shooter whose capabilities had once been legendary within military communities that understood the value of marksmanship applied with mathematical precision under impossible conditions. Her 30 years of civilian existence had ended with a transmission that demanded immediate return to military service for a mission that would either save American lives or result in her own death in mountains where precision shooting was measured in millimeters rather than inches. The automotive mechanic was disappearing forever, replaced by the warrior whose true capabilities were about to be revealed through application of skills that belonged in military legend rather than civilian repair shops. Federal transport carried Sarah toward Afghanistan while her former neighbors processed the reality that their trusted automotive specialist had been concealing military capabilities throughout 3 decades of community service. The quiet woman who'd fixed their cars and solved their mechanical problems was revealed as someone whose true capabilities exceeded anything they'd imagined possible. The crisis that had activated Sarah's deployment was escalating as enemy forces increased pressure on the trapped Marines while American resources remained inadequate for conventional resolution. Time was running out for 2nd Platoon as their ammunition supplies approached critically low levels, while medical casualties mounted beyond their ability to provide adequate treatment. Sarah's mission parameters required her to neutralize enemy positions through precision shooting at distances that exceeded the effective range of standard military weapons while operating under environmental conditions that would challenge the most advanced ballistic calculation systems. The shots would need to be perfect on the first attempt, as missed opportunities would result in American casualties that could have been prevented through successful engagement. The federal aircraft carrying Sarah toward combat operations represented the convergence of strategic necessity and individual capability, applied to a situation that conventional military resources couldn't resolve. Her deployment was being treated as a national security priority that justified extraordinary resource commitment while demanding performance that exceeded her previous military service under conditions that offered no margin for error. Sarah understood that her return to combat operations would either save the trapped Marines through application of capabilities that few possessed or result in mission failure that would cost American lives, while revealing her identity to enemies who'd once sought her elimination. The stakes were absolute, as federal authority demanded the resurrection of skills that belonged in her classified past rather than her civilian present. The quiet mechanic was disappearing into military transport while her community struggled to understand how they'd failed to recognize capabilities that belonged in classified operations rather than automotive repair. Sarah Chen was returning to war as the precision shooter, whose legendary abilities were needed to save Marines facing impossible odds in mountains where American lives depended on marksmanship applied with mathematical precision under combat conditions. Her civilian existence in Millbrook was ending as federal requirements took priority over personal preferences for anonymity and community integration. The automotive repair specialist was being replaced by the warrior whose capabilities had been maintained through 30 years of careful preparation for missions that she'd hoped never to accept again. Federal authority was demanding the application of skills that transcended conventional military capabilities, while circumstances required performance that would either save American lives or result in casualties that could have been prevented through successful precision engagement. Sarah Chen was approaching the moment when her true capabilities would be tested under conditions that would define her legacy as either the precision shooter who saved 2nd Platoon or the federal asset who failed when American lives depended on abilities that few possessed. The crisis was forcing her return to military service under conditions that demanded perfection while offering no opportunity for correction or second attempts. Sarah's precision shooting capabilities were about to be tested through application of skills that belonged in military legend applied to a situation that conventional resources couldn't resolve through any means other than individual marksmanship, performed with mathematical precision under impossible environmental conditions. Her transport aircraft approached Afghanistan while the trapped Marines faced increasing enemy pressure with dwindling resources and mounting casualties that threatened to overwhelm their defensive capabilities. Time was running out for 2nd Platoon as Sarah prepared to apply capabilities that had been maintained through 30 years of careful readiness for missions that demanded the resurrection of skills belonging in her classified military past rather than her civilian automotive repair present. The Barrett M82A1 felt like an extension of Sarah's soul as she settled into her firing position on the rocky outcrop overlooking the Cooner Valley. 18 hours after leaving her garage in Millbrook, she was back in the element where she'd once been a legend, where the convergence of mathematics, physics, and deadly precision would determine whether 12 Marines lived or died in the mountains below. The wind gauge readings showed gusts up to 42 miles per hour, with shifting patterns that would require constant recalculation. At 1,847 meters, her .50 caliber rounds would drop nearly 30 feet without compensation, while the crosswind would push them 18 inches off target. Sarah's ballistic computer processed atmospheric data that most snipers had never encountered, displaying solutions that pushed the boundaries of what was mathematically possible. Sarah's garage was transformed into a federal training facility where she would conduct advanced marksmanship instruction for military personnel and law enforcement specialists whose assignments required precision shooting capabilities under extreme conditions. Her automotive repair business evolved into a cover for activities that utilized her true qualifications while serving community needs that had grown beyond simple mechanical repair. The congressional recognition that followed her mission included classified commendations that acknowledged her contributions to national security, while maintaining operational security for capabilities that remain strategically valuable. Sarah's precision shooting abilities were officially recognized while preserving the anonymity necessary for future federal deployment when situations demanded skills that few possessed. Her relationship with Millbrook was redefined through revelation that had destroyed her constructed civilian identity, while creating new opportunities for community service that utilized her actual capabilities rather than concealing them. Sarah Chen, the mechanic, had disappeared forever, replaced by someone whose true qualifications could be acknowledged, while continuing to serve neighbors who appreciated her contributions regardless of their extraordinary nature. The invisible woman had become permanently visible through circumstances that had demanded the revelation of capabilities maintained through 30 years of federal readiness. Sarah's emergence from concealment had saved American lives while transforming her from hidden asset to acknowledged expert whose precision shooting abilities would continue serving national security through applications that transcended her previous civilian limitations. Her story became inspiration for others who possessed extraordinary capabilities while serving in ordinary positions, demonstrating that excellence often existed in unexpected places while waiting for circumstances that demanded its revelation. Sarah Chen had proven that true service sometimes required the sacrifice of personal preferences for the greater good when American lives depended on capabilities that few possessed and fewer still were willing to deploy under impossible conditions. The emergence was complete as Sarah embraced her role as the precision shooter whose legendary abilities had been preserved through civilian concealment, while remaining ready for missions that demanded mathematical accuracy applied under combat stress. Her transformation from invisible mechanic to acknowledged expert represented the culmination of federal investment in capabilities that had been maintained through decades of preparation for moments when American lives depended on precision that existed at the limits of human possibility. 6 months after the impossible shots that had saved 2nd Platoon in the mountains of Afghanistan, Sarah Chen stood before a gathering that would have been unimaginable during her decades of hidden service. The Millbrook Community Center was packed with faces she'd known for 30 years, but their expressions now carried a mixture of awe, respect, and understanding that transformed every relationship she'd carefully cultivated while concealing her true nature. Mayor Patricia Hoffman stepped to the podium with the ceremonial key that would officially recognize Sarah's contributions to both national security and community service. "We always knew Sarah was special," the mayor began, her voice carrying across a room filled with neighbors who'd brought their broken vehicles to Chen's Auto Repair, without realizing they were interacting with one of America's most elite warriors. "But we never imagined that our trusted mechanic was also protecting our freedom through service that most of us can't even comprehend." Sarah accepted the recognition with the same quiet dignity that had characterized her automotive work, understanding that this moment represented the final transformation from invisible guardian to acknowledged hero. The woman who'd spent 3 decades deflecting attention and minimizing her capabilities was now being celebrated for achievements that belonged in military legend rather than small-town acknowledgement. The ceremony included presentations from military officials whose presence in Millbrook would have been impossible to explain before Sarah's revelation. General Patricia Morrison, Commandant of the Marine Corps, had traveled from Washington specifically to recognize capabilities that had saved American lives through precision shooting that exceeded theoretical limitations. Staff Sergeant Chen represents the finest traditions of Marine Corps excellence, the general announced to an audience that was still processing the reality that their automotive repair specialist possessed qualifications that warranted attention from the highest levels of military command. Colonel James Richardson, whose suspicions had contributed to the pressure that eventually forced Sarah's emergence, now served as her official liaison with federal agencies that continued to value her expertise for specialized consultations. Sarah's technical knowledge and precision capabilities represent strategic national assets that have been maintained through exemplary dedication to service. Richardson explained to community members who were learning that their neighbors' true qualifications exceeded anything they'd imagined possible. The recognition extended beyond military acknowledgement to include appreciation from the automotive customers, whose lives had been touched by Sarah's service throughout her civilian concealment. Betty Rodriguez spoke for many when she addressed the gathering with gratitude that transcended simple mechanical repair. "Sarah didn't just fix our cars," Betty explained, her voice carrying the emotion of someone whose economic survival had depended on affordable automotive service. "She kept our lives running when we couldn't afford to have them break down. Now we know she was also keeping America safe while she was taking care of us." Danny Williams, whose modified truck had provided one of many opportunities for Sarah to demonstrate knowledge that exceeded civilian expectations, now understood that his automotive education had come from someone whose technical expertise belonged in advanced engineering applications rather than small-town repair work. "Miss Chun taught me more about engines and performance than I learned in 2 years of automotive school," Danny told the assembled crowd. "Knowing what I know now about her background, I realized I was getting instruction from someone whose qualifications would impress factory engineers." The transformation of Chun's auto repair reflected Sarah's new role as an acknowledged expert whose capabilities could be utilized openly rather than concealed behind automotive service. The garage had been expanded to include federal training facilities where law enforcement personnel and military specialists received advanced instruction in precision shooting, technical diagnostics, and equipment maintenance that utilized Sarah's full range of qualifications. Dr. Rebecca Foster had partnered with Sarah to establish medical support protocols for precision shooting training, combining her medical expertise with Sarah's understanding of physiological demands that belonged in advanced performance research. Sarah's ability to maintain fine motor control and mathematical calculation under extreme stress represents capabilities that medical science is only beginning to understand, Dr. Foster explained during the presentation that revealed the scientific foundation underlying elite marksmanship performance. The training programs that Sarah developed attracted students from federal agencies, military special operations units, and law enforcement organizations, whose personnel required capabilities that exceeded standard training curricula. Her instruction combined technical expertise with practical application under conditions that simulated the stress and complexity of real-world operations where precision meant the difference between mission success and casualties. Officer Jennifer Martinez, Deputy Sheriff Kevin Martinez's daughter, had become Sarah's first civilian student in a program designed to identify and develop exceptional shooting talent among young people whose potential might otherwise remain undiscovered. "Sarah shows us that extraordinary capabilities can develop anywhere," Jennifer explained during a demonstration that revealed natural aptitude enhanced by instruction from someone whose teaching methods reflected decades of elite performance. The scholarship program that Sarah established used proceeds from her federal consulting work to provide opportunities for students whose backgrounds or circumstances might prevent them from accessing advanced training that could lead to careers in law enforcement, military service, or technical specialization. Recipients included young people from families that couldn't afford specialized education, rural students whose geographic isolation limited their opportunities, and urban youth whose potential had been overlooked by conventional assessment methods. Maria Santos, whose ancient minivan Sarah had kept operational through innovative repairs that extended its life far beyond reasonable expectations, now worked as Sarah's administrative assistant while completing coursework toward an automotive technology degree. "Sarah didn't just fix my car," Maria reflected during an interview with regional media outlets that were covering the story of Millbrook's hidden hero. "She showed me that technical knowledge and problem-solving skills could create opportunities I'd never imagined possible." The ripple effects of Sarah's revelation extended throughout the community as her example inspired others to recognize and develop their own hidden talents. Tom Bradley discovered that his mechanical aptitude, which had been limited to weekend projects, could be enhanced through systematic study that led to employment with a precision manufacturing company. Mrs. Patterson's electrical troubleshooting abilities, demonstrated through her successful resolution of household problems, attracted attention from contractors who offered training opportunities in commercial electrical work. Sarah's influence on military training doctrine reflected her unique combination of combat experience and civilian technical expertise that provided perspectives unavailable through conventional military career paths. Federal Agencies Incorporated. Her insights into advanced training programs, while her precision shooting techniques were analyzed and systematized for instruction of future elite marksmen whose missions would demand capabilities that pushed the boundaries of human performance. The congressional testimony that Sarah provided included classified briefings that influenced national security policy, while her public appearances educated civilian audiences about the dedication and sacrifice required to maintain America's defense capabilities. Her story became part of military recruiting efforts that emphasized the value of diverse backgrounds and unconventional career paths in developing the WEM capabilities needed for 21st century security challenges. The international recognition that followed Sarah's mission included invitations to address military audiences and allied nations whose own special operations communities were interested in learning from her experience and training methods. Her precision shooting techniques were studied by experts from multiple countries, while her equipment modifications and ballistic calculations contributed to advances in long-range marksmanship that would benefit military forces worldwide. Sarah's relationship with her former customers evolved as they processed the revelation that their trusted mechanic had been maintaining military readiness throughout 3 decades of civilian service. Jake Morrison, whose construction business had benefited from Sarah's reliable automotive service, now understood that his vehicles had been maintained by someone whose technical standards exceeded anything available through commercial service providers. "I always wondered why my trucks ran better after Sarah worked on them than they did when they were new," Morrison admitted during a community meeting where neighbors shared their experiences with their extraordinary neighbor. The federal protection protocols that remained in place reflected ongoing security concerns about Sarah's safety from enemies who might seek retaliation for her military service and continued federal involvement. Her celebrity status as America's most famous precision shooter created visibility that required careful management to prevent her becoming a target for hostile forces that viewed her capabilities as threats to their operations. Sarah's mentorship of young marksmen included instruction in the psychological and ethical dimensions of precision shooting that went beyond technical training to address the moral responsibilities that came with capabilities to take life at extreme distances. Her teaching emphasized the weight of decisions that belonged to precision shooters while preparing students for the emotional and psychological challenges they would face in applying lethal skills under combat conditions. The legacy firearms that Sarah designed incorporated innovations developed through her decades of experience with precision shooting under extreme conditions. Her modifications to standard military weapons improved accuracy and reliability, while her custom ammunition designs enhanced performance at extended ranges under adverse environmental conditions. Military contractors studied her technical innovations, while ammunition manufacturers incorporated her designs into commercial products that would benefit civilian and military marksmen worldwide. The community garden that was established in Sarah's honor reflected her continuing commitment to civilian service that complemented her acknowledged military expertise. The garden provided fresh produce for families whose economic circumstances limited their access to nutritious food, while creating educational opportunities for children whose exposure to agriculture and environmental science had been limited by urban or suburban living conditions. Sarah's evening walks through Millbrook now brought recognition and appreciation from neighbors who understood that they'd been protected by someone whose true capabilities had exceeded their imagination. Throughout 3 decades of hidden service, children approached her with questions about military service and precision shooting, while adults expressed gratitude for both her community service and her national security contributions. The small museum that was established to commemorate Sarah's service included displays that educated visitors about the technical challenges of precision shooting, while honoring the sacrifice and dedication required to maintain elite capabilities throughout extended periods of civilian concealment. The exhibits combined military history with technical education that helped civilians understand the complexity and difficulty of the missions that demanded Sarah's unique skills. The documentary film that chronicled Sarah's transformation from hidden guardian to acknowledged hero reached national audiences while inspiring others whose own hidden talents might contribute to community service and national security if properly recognized and developed. Her story became part of military history while demonstrating that extraordinary service often came from unexpected sources and unconventional career paths. Sarah's continuing federal consultations included missions that remained classified, while her acknowledged expertise influenced training programs and equipment development that would enhance American military capabilities for decades to come. Her precision shooting techniques were incorporated into official doctrine, while her ballistic innovations contributed to advances in long-range marksmanship that would benefit multiple generations of elite marksmen. The transformation of Millbrook, from ordinary small town to the community that had unknowingly harbored one of America's most elite warriors, attracted attention from military historians and sociologists who studied the phenomenon of hidden service and civilian concealment of military capabilities. Sarah's story became a case study in federal security protocols while demonstrating the effectiveness of long-term concealment in protecting valuable assets whose safety required complete anonymity. The annual Sarah Chen Community Service Award recognized individuals whose contributions to community welfare demonstrated the same dedication to helping others that had characterized Sarah's automotive service throughout her civilian concealment. Recipients included volunteers, public servants, and ordinary citizens whose extraordinary contributions made their communities stronger while reflecting the values that Sarah had exemplified through 3 decades of hidden service. The Precision Shooting Academy that was established in Sarah's name attracted students from around the world while generating revenue that supported community development projects in Millbrook. The academy combined advanced technical training with education about the responsibilities and ethical considerations that accompanied elite marksmanship capabilities, ensuring that graduates understood both the technical and moral dimensions of precision shooting under combat conditions. Sarah Chen's legacy transcended her individual achievements to inspire recognition that extraordinary capabilities often existed in ordinary disguise, waiting for circumstances that demanded their revelation. Her transformation from invisible guardian to acknowledged hero demonstrated that true service required sacrifice and dedication that most people couldn't comprehend, while showing that America's defense depended on individuals whose contributions often remained hidden until circumstances demanded their emergence from concealment. The story of the woman who fixed cars for 30 years until she grabbed a Barrett and saved a whole platoon had become legend that would inspire future generations of Americans whose own hidden talents might someday serve their communities and their nation in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Sarah Chen had proven that excellence came from unexpected sources, while showing that true heroes often walked among ordinary people, maintaining extraordinary capabilities until the moment when lives depended on their willingness to step into the light and reveal who they truly were. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.